Hi, recently I realized that I have been sleeping on one of the game's most powerful features. The interesting thing about text displays is that we can change their background color. So by blanking the text and modifying the scale, we essentially have a way to render arbitrary colors in-game. The most obvious use for this is stacking many of them in a grid to create a digital display. I recreated my old 3D renderer, but with much more accurate colors. I also replaced the old clunky controls with the new input predicate system, allowing me to control the camera directly from my keyboard. I locked the player's movement by mounting them on an armor stand. I also created a Mandelbrot Set Renderer. I can use either of these items as a cursor. One of them moves the viewport while the other one does not. If you zoom into these strands, you can find smaller sets, which contain even smaller sets within them. Zooming into the valley between these two bulbs, you can find these spiral structures. Here's a different one. And if you zoom in far enough, you will start seeing floating point errors. You can add a slight curvature to the screen as well. I also created a painting app. You can select a color using these sliders and paint to the canvas using either a brush or a flood fill tool. To sample a color, you can use the eyedropper tool. The sliders and the canvas can all be positioned and rotated independently. To detect when a player is looking at a text display, I first define a line representing the player's line of sight. Then, I take the inverse of the matrix I used to transform the text display, and I use that to transform the line. Finally, I check if the new line intersects the plane between 0 and 1. Text display backgrounds support any RGBA value, meaning you can also adjust their opacity. One way to use this feature is tinting a player's vision by encasing them in text displays. I used this technique to add a blindness effect to my SkyTorch plugin. Unlike other methods, you can precisely control the color and smoothly fade out the effect by interpolating the opacity. Another way to use this feature is highlighting blocks by pulsating their opacity. You could also use this to create colored liquids. Or smart glass. And since text displays are only visible from one side, you could also use them to make one-way glass. In my video about procedural animations, I created a cloak using block displays. I recreated this effect using text displays to see how it would look with accurate color interpolation. I added a bit of noise so it wouldn't look so flat. Entities don't render behind text displays, so just by lowering the opacity, you can create even more accurate cloaks. Using the billboard option, you can make text displays always face players. You could use this to create your own custom particle systems, since unlike regular particles, you have precise control over their movement, size, and color. With this, I created a very simple flame simulation. The particles are generated with random velocity, accelerated upwards and towards the center so that the flame tapers at the top. They change color as they age, and I created a few different variants just by changing the gradient. I also created this water splash effect. For this, I just generate particles with a random velocity and accelerate them downwards to simulate gravity. When they hit water, they either bounce or sink based on random chance. Finally, I created fireflies. Every tick, their flight direction is slightly randomized, with a small bias towards their spawn location so they don't stray too far away. After all this, I still feel that I only scratched the surface of what is possible. I'm curious to hear what you would do with this technology.